Hello and welcome, Star People. This is APM, your Intrepid Star Guide, and this is another episode 156, in our Golden Dawn series where we continue to question inherited systems and reclaim our astrological authority and build correspondences that reflect lived experience rather than dogma. And so today's focus, we're revisiting the Lovers, the Chariot, and the Strength card through a critical contemporary lens. And so we're examining Golden Dawn assignments, exploring the alternatives to creating personal correspondences that honor desire, will, and power beyond patriarchal frameworks. Before we get to that, a little housekeeping. This series assumes familiarity with the Golden Dawn basics and invites you to become an intellectual or outlaw mystic, which means someone who respects lineage yet refuses stagnation, who thinks dangerously, therefore for themselves, that's critically and for yourself, and builds their own sacred architecture. Also, we are, and by we I mean me and the Outlaw Astrology, are available on YouTube, Spotify, for the podcast, and you can find us on Instagram, on the socials, and our Pinterest page, which is located in the show notes, and we also have the Daily Stargazer podcast and newsletter, free and paid editions, which have a plethora of information, over 500 archived posts, over 80 episodes and counting. And so that's what's behind the wall if you decide to join me behind the veil. And thank you very much for listening, and now onward. Alrighty, so let's talk about the Lovers. And Lovers is typically you're going to see it mentioned with the sign of Gemini. And it's called the alchemy of choice and desire. Basically, that's the Golden Dawn framework. And so when we're looking at it, Lovers equal Gemini, that's duality, communication, mental connection, and choices between opposites. Those are the keywords you're usually going to see associated. But here's the assignment that I wish to question. Does Gemini's airy mental quality capture the full embodied soul level of the Lovers? Is this card really about thinking or about choosing, desiring, merging, and the sacred friction of relationship? And here's the problem for me. I have always found it difficult to connect this astrological correspondence association with that particular card. I can think of many other planets, elements, signs that are more aligned for the way I wish to practice tarot, where my esoteric, metaphysical, etc. practice tends to go. It doesn't tend to go in that direction. I think that the Golden Dawn creators saw two major figures on the card. There's the angel, but there's two figures on the card, and thought Gemini too, and they thought duality, because Gemini has that sort of duality to it as well, male, female, if you look deeply at the card, and that's how we get there. Now, consider that these people were doing this practice in the late 19th, early 20th centuries, and most of them were ceremonial mages, and the Golden Dawn was part of a collective of artists, healers, etc., poets, writers, thinkers, who were living a very different life than the life we currently lead. It was a practice, and it was a collective, which had some pretty prominent people for the day, which would include W.B. Yeats, for example, and Crowley, famous Crowley, was also a member, along with Pamela Coleman Smith and a few other luminaries for the late 19th, early 20th century. So I imagine when they looked at it, they thought two figures. This makes perfect sense. Okay, so let's explore some alternatives. Venus, for example, could be desire, attraction, relational harmony, and aesthetic union. How about Libra? Partnership, balance, conscious choice in relationships. We could also consider asteroids in this. If you are an asteroid, interested in asteroid and asteroid astrology, this might be for you. The asteroid Eros, erotic connection, soul desire, and creative union. It could be Chiron, another planetoid, kind of operates like a planet, rather operates also like a comet, which is part of what is called a centaur in astronomy. There is quite a few objects in space, several of them in fact, of which Chiron happens to be the lead one. It is in orbit between, well, it is in orbit some of the year between Jupiter and Saturn, and some of the year between Saturn and Uranus. So if you've ever heard it said that, oh, it operates kind of like a bridge, that's not necessarily true. Planets move on the ecliptic, and they also have orbits that are wide enough to take them inside the orbit of another planet for part of the year, or even for several years, and Chiron does that. So it is both a social planet and an outer planet, depending on the time of the year that you were born. More on that in a later episode, but Chiron is about the wound, the healing that happens through intimate encounters, also being tokenized or othered. Or, as I have chosen, I chose Sagittarius. And here's why I chose Sagittarius. That was not my intention specifically, but when I chose it, it was more of an intuitive thing. I believe that I started with the elements, and then I started with the planets that felt most aligned, and then the zodiacals, because there's 12 of them, and realized later that I'd given Sagittarius to the choice. And here's the reason why it makes sense to me once I did it. Because to me, the focus is on ethics, ethical choice, ethical relationship. What is our relationship to ethics in the first place? That's about ethical choice, not moral choice. Morals are external. They are imposed on people via the culture, via society, via our community, via our tribes. But ethics are internal processes. And so that's why I feel that Sagittarius for my practice makes more sense. Now, consider this is a note I want to make for the entire series. I'm in no way saying that this is forever. This is for how my practice looks right now. I am going to be honest in saying that this is going to change. I have a lot of mutability in my chart and a lot of fire as well. And so that tells me that my ethics are going to shape shift, and those ethics are going to inform how I practice mystically, etc. And so this is going to change. But for right now, it's Sagittarius. And because I am fascinated by ethics, and ethics are under the domain, especially in my own system, which, by the way, I encourage you to come up with your own rulerships. And here's what I mean. There are books on rulerships, and I'm going to give you a title of one that happens to be in my collection. And if I can grab it, and I have, but I'm going to have to go fix some things. But the book is called The Rulership Book, and it is by Rex E. Bills. You'll probably find it on Amazon or any other used bookstore, and here's why. There's several different types of books, but this is the more modern one. It will be categorized by planet, by sign, particularly. And so some energies will be Mercury, and some energies will be Gemini, and I always consider Sagittarius the sign of philosophy, ethics, things of that nature, because ethics are a framework from which one can make decisions, okay? So that's just a long way of saying that this is why I chose, one of the reasons why I chose Sagittarius for this particular card. However, yours might differ. So let's complicate this further. What if the Lovers is about internal integration? What if it's about choosing between different aspects of self, the union of opposites within? An alchemical marriage of masculine and feminine energies rather than the typical one that you are going to see, which is, a guy marrying a girl, because that's what sometimes looks like marriage to quite a few people in the world, in the Western world in particular. And so what if it's more about this archetypal, alchemical inner marriage, inner bond, inner integration, inner fusion, for example? And so I would say explore this further. Reflect on moments of profound choice or union in your life. What do you feel at one with? What makes you feel unity? What makes you feel connected? Because that's basically, we're talking about communion. What makes that, what sparks that in you? What seeds that in you? What's the pulse? What's the signal? What does that look like, feel like, taste like, etc. for you? So, are these more Gemini-like energies, more mental, communicative, dual? Or do they feel more Venusian or Libran or erotically charged? What correspondence honors your lived experience of love, choice, and ethics? Because at the end of the day, you want your practice to reflect who you are in your lived experience rather than the people who created the text and created the tarot in the first place. Yes, it's very nice to honor the past, the lineage. We are honoring that by talking about the system in the first place as it is currently structured, and then restructuring it to suit our own needs, because that is how things go forward. Things that stay too rigid have a tendency to collapse, as we are seeing in the world right now. We're looking at the collapse of things that have been too rigid and too big, and therefore do not have the fluidity of movement necessary to move forward. So disruption serves a purpose here. Discomfort serves a purpose here, and it is to rebuild something so it can move and survive, which is why we want to do this. Now let's move on to the chariot. The chariot is question, Cancer or the warrior's focused will. That's how it's usually laid out. So this is the Golden Dawn assignment. The chariot equals Cancer, protective drive, emotional determination, and movement towards security. This is cardinal water energy. However, let's acknowledge that tension. Cancer's association with home, safety, and emotional retreat seems at odds with the with the chariot's forward momentum, conquest, and triumph. So, cardinal water does initiate movement, but it's more on the emotional plane, and it's more protective. So it's like creating a conservation, movement to protect our waters, to protect our lands, to protect the animals that are here, because all of that gone, and we will follow very shortly after. And so, does the chariot card still have that Cancerian energy or not? So let's question deeper. Is a chariot truly about emotional security, or is it about disciplined will, victory through focus, and harnessing of opposing forces towards a singular goal, which makes more sense to me? What I am interacting with is what I'm seeing on the card, a singular figure who is using a force, because in some cards, particularly in the Rider-Waite-Smith one, you are not going to see the charioteer holding reins. You're going to see them standing in the chariot, which seems to be currently forward-facing and not moving. Sometimes you'll see movement in the card. It's implied, and other times there will be a sense of stillness. Now, in my opinion, I see the black Sphinx and the white Sphinx as duality, potentially opposing forces, and I see the charioteer calmly there attempting to work with that energy rather than force it. It is moving toward a singular goal. I do not believe that Cancerian energy speaks to me on this particular card. So let's explore some alternatives. Mars, directed action, conquest, warrior energy, drive. Yes, that makes sense. Absolutely makes sense. It has that kind of, charioteer, like Roman centurion coming back from war type of energy, or Roman centurion going out to war type of energy, except, more middle-agey, but you get my point. This is where we're at. This is how that energy could potentially feel. If it feels that way for you, does this make sense? Does it feel right in your body? Because it can't just feel right in your mind. It must feel right in your body. It must feel right in your spirits. It must feel right in your soul. So, how about Aries? Initiation, courage, pioneering spirit, forward, raw forward motion. How about the Sun? Conscious will, victory, triumphant self-actualization. What about Saturn? Discipline, mastery, control through structure. Or, in my case, I chose Capricorn, and here is my reasoning. Capricorn is about that single focus. It is sustained effort, and the question, is this scalable? Because if you're going to be scaling mountains, you need to be doing so in a way that's scalable. Does this make sense? Can I sustain this effort consistently? Because scaling mountains requires consistent energy, consistent effort, and consistent focus. And it cannot be everything in the beginning and then you peter out, because that's how energy works. If it's all in the moment, all of it used in the first bit, it's going to peter out, and there will be no energy to sustain and no energy to scale. And I hate using that word, but it's very Capricorn to me. And so the likelihood of reaching the top of whatever that mountain is, and that mountain is metaphorical, figuratively speaking. We're not talking about being corporate raiders. We're talking about whatever the top of that mountain is as it exists for each of us, because each of us have a different top that we're working toward, a different altitude we're trying to reach, a different place where vision can happen. And some people, it looks like being a CEO, and other people, it looks like being a self-employed artist, for example, or starting their own practice or company or what have you. And so that is why I chose Capricorn for this particular card. Notice that is the reverse of Cancer. This is toward a single objective, which is very Capricorn in its energy. And hence the reason why I chose it. So, let's move on to the Strength card. So, Strength is Leo, or the sovereign power of embodied presence. Okay, so let's review the Golden Dawn assignment, which is Strength equals Leo. And the keywords are courage, creative life force, heart-centered power, fixed fire, solar radiance. Let's affirm the resonance. So, Leo's assignment to Strength feels deeply right for many. The gentle yet sovereign power, the courage that comes from heart rather than force, the solar divinity and dignity of the card. So, but let's push back a little further. Let's push. Is Leo's fixed fire quality too stable, too externally radiant for a card that often depicts quiet internal mastery? Does Strength deserve a more complex, multi-layered correspondence? Let's explore some alternatives. So Scorpio energy, and some of the keywords would be internal power, transformation, restraint, mastery of instinct, and shadow, would be good here. Absolutely. Very intense, very powerful, but it's quiet. Scorpio energy is more internalized than, say, Taurus energy. You can see Taurus energy a little bit more. Scorpio energy is intimacy, and vulnerability, but it's hidden. Why is it hidden? Because it requires presence. One must be present to that energy in order to sit with it comfortably. So Scorpio energy is not naturally comfortable, and this card isn't actually a comfortable card. Consider that it is a figure, usually female, with their hands on the mouth of a lion, which is quite dangerous, and they're either closing the lion's mouth or gently opening the lion's mouth, which is a very strange image, but okay, let's go with it. We got Pluto as a possible alternative, and deep soul strength, power through surrender, and the ability to metabolize darkness. We also, for those asteroid astrologers out there, we have the asteroid Vesta, sacred inner fire, devotion, contained power. We also have Taurus as a potential, embodied strength, patient endurance, the power of gentle persistence. In my case, it ended up being Aquarius. And why? Because, in my opinion, it takes a lot of strength to be an outsider. It takes a lot of strength to be a token. It takes a lot of strength to be an outlaw, a heretic, etc. That takes strength and fortitude, but also a gentleness, because you're going to be dealing with friction. And Aquarius energy is humanitarian. It's egalitarian. So when you're looking at that card, you're not looking at someone having power over. You're not looking at power under, as in the Emperor card. You're looking at power with. And that is Aquarius energy. Aquarius energy is power with. I wish to share that power with you. So the female figure is showing the lion in that picture, which is our own primal, instinctive nature, that I can be trusted. It's the conscious mind and the unconscious having a conversation mediated by the union concept of ego, which is not the same as it's understood by Freudian psychologists and psychoanalysts. It is an interface. The ego is the interface between the conscious and the unconscious. It is not your personality in Jungian psychology, in Jungian depth psychology particularly. It is an interface. It allows you to, these parts to talk to each other, because this is the part that helps the two communicate. And so Aquarius energy, humility, scientific, cool-headed, stepping outside of our culture, outside of our tribes, outside of our society, outside of our community, but also bringing to it a gentleness, a compassion, an empathy, a kindness for the human condition, and an understanding of what it is like when you do not nicely fall inside of that framework. And so it is a power with, which is very Aquarius. And that is the reason why I chose it. Okay, so let's talk about feminine reclamation. And in the card, as I've said, strength is depicted as a woman taming a lion, and this can be read as patriarchal. The woman must control her wildness. It could be seen as feminist. A woman possesses sovereign power over instinct and integrates rather than suppresses these instinctual energies. A note about instinct that I learnt from a scientist, an evolutionary scientist, and instinct cannot be overridden. Did you know that? Because at the time when I saw that, I didn't know. There's a difference between drives and instincts. Instincts cannot be overridden. Nothing you can do can override an instinct. A drive can be overridden, like a sex drive, for example. Sex is not actually an instinct in human beings. It may have been once, but it isn't in us. We have a choice of whether or not we're going to act on our sex drives, although some of us have a harder time with this than others. But it's a drive. We can engage or not engage, whereas with animals, it is definitely an instinct, because it's very difficult for them to override the sexual instinct, especially that's what going into hate means. That's an instinct. And so we're talking about instincts here. Let's just know that that's what I mean when I say it. And so which correspondence supports your own political, spiritual, mystical reading of this card? And so I suggest lived inquiry. Where and when have you felt strong? Was it Leo-like, as in radiant, courageous, heart forward? Or was it Scorpionic, as in quiet, deep, and transformative? Was it Pluto-touched, forged through crises? Or earthly, persistent, as in Taurus Vesta? And so let your body and biography guide your correspondence. Okay? So let's talk a little bit briefly about how to create your own correspondences. And we're going to be very practical, and this will continue out through the series as it has done. But step one, I suggest sitting with the card. Meditate, journal, pull it repeatedly. Notice what planet, sign, or archetype keeps appearing in your intuition and in synchronicities. Put it on your altar also. If you've got an altar or a desk, put it there so you can, where your eyes can see, so you can constantly have your eyes pointed toward it and have more of an opportunity to meditate upon it. If you put it in a deck somewhere, because It's out of sight, out of mind. If I'm not looking at it, I'm not seeing it. If I'm not seeing it, I'm not engaging. And if you are neuroatypically wired, that's probably you as well. Put it where your eyes can see and make it easy to integrate and engage. 2. Research alternatives. So look beyond the Golden Dawn to other systems like Marseille, Thoth, modern psychological tarot, which I love, asteroid astrology, fixed stars, evolutionary astrology. If any of that resonates with you, look into that and see what resonates. Step 3, test in practice. So use your experimental correspondences for about 1 to 3 lunar cycles and notice if it deepens the interpretation, clarifies timing, or makes you feel more alive than the traditional assignment. Step 4, document your own system. Write down your personal correspondences. Write down your reasoning. Write down your lived experience with them. And this becomes your own grimoire, your own book of shadows, if you like, and your own living tarot astrology codex. Step 5, which is new here, share and discuss. Feel free to bring your alternative correspondences to study groups, to online communities, to share with trusted fellow practitioners and trusted intellectual discourse, because it will sharpen intuition and reveal blind spots. And lastly, you want to emphasize this is not about this discarding tradition. It's about engaging with it critically, respectfully, courageously. The best occultics are also heretics. And so, rebellion is a sacred act when it's done with integrity. Okay, so, key takeaway here. The lovers, the chariot, and strength carry potent energies that may or may not be fully captured by Gemini, Cancer, and Leo. And so your tarot practice deepens when you dare to question, to experiment, to build correspondence from embodied, lived wisdom rather than inherited doctrine. So, choose one of these 3 cards, lovers, chariot, or strength, and spend the week working with alternative correspondences and notice what shifts in your readings, your relationship to desire, will, power, ethics, your connection to the cards, and living intelligence. And last note, we have the Daily Stargazer podcast and newsletter, and that newsletter also will contain written, more concise newsletter formats of this podcast episode. Those are always free, so when you sign up for a free subscription, you can read these in whatever new and full moon posts I have available on the site in the archives, plus the 80 or so podcast episodes. You have the freedom to look through those and read whatever I've got available for the free subscribers. I am me, and the podcast is available at the Outlaw Astrology on Instagram. You can find the podcast on YouTube, Spotify, and Amazon Podcasts, etc. So those links are always going to be in the show notes. And thank you very much, Star People, for listening today. And to intellectual rebellion, to mystical integrity, and to outlaw grace. Keep your feet on the ground and your eyes to the stars. Peace and astro magic, Star People.